Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is David I, and I'm here in Scotts Valley, California, and welcome to this skill sprint on creating iOS 64-bit apps and universal bundles, or better known as fat binaries for iOS. There's my email address and my Twitter handle if you want to contact me. And also, there's a short URL there for the blog post that is live on the Community 3.0 site, which has the links that I mention in this skill sprint. This skill sprint works with Rad Studio XE8, App Method, the latest release. I'll be covering Object Pascal and C++. And since this is about iOS 64-bit, it works with iOS. But some of the techniques also can work with the other platforms as it relates to just regular programming and using buttons and FireMonkey and FireUI and so on. You can find out what's new in Rad Studio XE8 on the doc wiki and also on the App Method doc wiki. So in this skill sprint, I'm going to cover what you need to do in Rad Studio XE8 to build 64-bit apps. This is a new target platform for Object Pascal and C++, iOS 64. A lot of the precursor work was done back in the days of Delphi for Win64 and C++ Builder for Win64, meaning compiler work, language work, runtime library work, some of the work involved in FireMonkey and in the VCL for Windows only as it relates to what is an integer, what is a long integer, a long. Native int was added so that native int type could float from 32-bit to 64-bit precision. All of the things that we did back in those days for C++ and Pascal on 64-bit as it relates to checking your code for shift left, shift right, all of those kinds of things. A lot of that work was done for you years ago. The new target platform of iOS 64, we created new compilers, DCC, ARM64, and a C++ ARM64 compiler. And that was connected into the tool chain with the 32-bit iOS compilers that we already had. So there is a project option that has been added for the Delphi compiler and the C++ compiler under the other options area where you can check a box if you want to build a universal binary app or fat binary, which will call the compiler twice for the application to create the ARM v7 and the ARM64 binaries, and then link those together into the universal binary app. Now, this all started back in October of last year when Apple announced that starting February 1st, any new apps that you want to submit to the Apple Store had to support 64-bit. They could also include 32-bit support. They also announced that if you had 32-bit apps in the Apple iOS App Store, that you could still update those 32-bit apps on their own, as long as they were accepted by Apple before the February 1st, 2015 date. And then in December, Apple announced that starting June 1st of 2015, that any app updates that you do, whether it's a 32-bit app or a 64-bit app, well, they must include 64-bit, or at least have 64 and 32-bit, meaning a universal binary. So it's your choice. If you have older apps in the store, 32-bit apps, okay, until Apple starts blocking those. Otherwise, you can ship a 64-bit app only to the Apple Store, or a universal binary 32 and 64-bit app. And again, you can always still build 32-bit and 64-bit apps for non-store apps. So if you do ad hoc deploy, or if you do developer deploys to specific devices, whether those are 32-bit iPod Touch or older, I think it's 5C and 5 iPhone and earlier, those are 32-bit processors, then you can still build 32-bit apps and connect them through USB or Wi-Fi or whatever mechanism. But if they're going to be store apps, they have to include 64-bit either by themselves or 64 and 32 in the FAT binary format. All right, enough of that. Let's take a look at what you need to do in the Rad Studio XE8 IDE. So I have a project group which has an Object Pascal project and a C++ project. And let's go to the Pascal and let's open up there. They're very simple apps. They have one button. And the button event handler just says button1.text, in the case of Object Pascal, equals size of native int string, convert the tag property of a button. That tag property is defined as native int. So we'll get the size of that and we'll display that so you can see if it's a 32-bit app, it'll display 4 bytes. If it's a 64-bit app, it'll display 8 bytes. And the same thing for C++. I've got a button and we just do a size of, we do a sprintf to get the size of the tag property and display the string size of native int equals bytes. We could have done size of pointer. We do the same thing, 4 bytes and 8 bytes, depending on the target that you build for. Now, I also created a video that's on YouTube. The YouTube video is there, and I have a link to it from the blog post, so it's right up front on that short URL. And that's about a 15 or 16-minute video that, like it's almost 17 minutes, about how to prepare your Rad Studio XE8 environment for iOS and OS X development. In the case of iOS, for both 32 and 64-bit. So if we go back to the IDE, you do that under Tools, Options. We've got our Connection Profile Manager, and I'm running on the Macintosh. I'm running my Platform Assistant Server version 16.0 that corresponds to XE8, and that's running over on my Mac side. And then in the SDK Manager, I've installed a 32-bit device target and a 64-bit device target, and pointed to the list of includes and library paths that were found by adding that profile and getting the information via the ID to the Platform Assistant Server from the SDKs that are installed, in my case 8.3 iOS and Mac OS X SDK 10.10.3. And if you make any changes over on the Mac side, you can just click Update Local File Cache. If you've got some third-party frameworks and libraries, you can click this button here and add other path items and then go and pull and make sure those are available over on the Macintosh side. So I've done that as part of my initial setup so that I have the right targets that I need. And if we look under Target Platforms, for example, I've got the iOS device 32-bit. My iPhone 6 is plugged in through USB cable, and I can build a 32-bit version, and I can also build a 64-bit version. For that matter, I can run a 32-bit version of this app on 32-bit Windows, 64-bit Windows, run a 32-bit version on Android, and a 32-bit version on OS X as well. So there's nothing special in this code that won't work. Native int is defined across all those platforms. All right, so let's switch over to my Macintosh, and I've got my phone over here, and I've got a size of native int app, and this is the Object Pascal version. The last time I compiled it was for 64-bit, so it says size of native int is 8 bytes. Let's switch back. And let's build a 32-bit version of this Pascal project. So it'll compile with the 32-bit compiler, link it, create the app bundle, and then deploy it over to my iPhone. And now it's doing the deploy, and then it'll do the launch, and we'll switch back over. And now that size of native int, the Pascal version, will be a 32-bit app. So if I click on the button, it says size of native int is 4 bytes. Right? Same thing for C++. Last time I built this one with C++. let's see. Oh, that was the one I was playing with. Let's go back over to the IDE, and let's go and set the size of native int. This one to 64-bit. That's fine. And hit run. So it'll compile and link a 64-bit version of a developer debug app. Okay, it's deploying it, and it should launch. We'll see. We might get a, there it comes. Okay, so let's go over here, and here's my 32. That's the 64-bit version, so it says size of native int is 8 bytes. Now, what do I need to do for building the fat binary or universal apps? Let's go. First, I'll bring up the message window because I want to show. Let's go and do a clear all messages. We'll go under for the Pascal version. We go project options, compiling, and in the other options, you'll see, oh, we're at 32-bit. Okay, let's go back. This is all live, so let's go back, and we need to build a 64-bit target. And then we go project options, compile. And now under other options, you'll see this generate iOS universal binary file, ARM v7 plus ARM64. I've got that set to true. So when I compiled and ran that one, it created a fat binary for you. And the size is, you get twice of the code part of the application, but it shares the data portion. So it's not 2 times the code and data. It's double approximately the code size for 32 and 64 if you have that checked on. And then the data is appended, your deployment data, icons, and other things as part of the app bundle. So let's go and do a build of this one. And again, I'm doing debug configuration, but I could do an application store or ad hoc as well. So making sure that's checked, I think it was, yeah, it was checked. It's right there, generate universal binary. So let's do a build. And what we'll see is, oh, let's do a, yeah. So what'll happen now is it'll actually launch the compiler twice. So it's compiling using, let's go and look at the output as it's happening, or after the fact it's linking. Okay. Okay, done. So what you'll see here is there's the DCC iOS ARM64 down in the message window. So it compiled for 64-bit. And then we'll also see it compile using DCC iOS ARM exe. So it compiled twice all the source files using the 64-bit and the 32-bit compilers. And then it linked all of that together to build the larger size universal binary or fat binary app. And the same thing happens for C++. If we go to the C++ target, 64-bit, and we go into project options, we go under advanced, it says generate iOS universal binary file ARM v7 and ARM64, turn that on, and then it will compile using BCC32 ARM and BCC64 ARM, those projects. Now, one other thing to note for you C++ developers, if you have Pascal files in your C++ project, you only need to turn on the generate iOS universal, and it will compile all the Pascal and all the C++ files in your project. There is, for the Delphi compiler, a setting down here, generate iOS universal binary for Delphi. You don't need to check this one. You can. It doesn't hurt anything. As long as you have the C compiler universal binary checked on, it will then compile all the C++ and all the Pascal in a C++ project. Okay, but you can, if you are worried, you can go and check it down there and have it checked up there, your choice. But it would, trust me, it will compile for both of those using both the compilers, or in the case of C++, if you have Pascal and C++ code, it will run the Pascal compilers and the C++ compilers, all four of those, to build that binary of a C++ project. And then if you try to build a 64-bit app and run it on a 32-bit device, you'll get a PA server error. It'll pop up saying it can't load that image onto the device that you've selected from your device target. So if I had an iPhone 4, for example, or iPhone 5 plugged in, and I tried to build a 64-bit target for it, it would run the compilers, but when it tried to load and launch the application to a 32-bit device, it would give you an error in the Windows IDE saying it can't do that. It's not a 64-bit target device. So 32-bit target devices are, I think, iPhone 5C and earlier, and iPod Touch. All the iPod Touches, even 5th generation, is a 32-bit. It's an ARM, I guess it's an A9. It's still a 32-bit processor. So what you need is a 5S and later for iPhone, and I forget which, Mac Mini. No, what is it? iPad Mini version 3, I think it is, and iPad Air and greater. I've got an iPad Air 2, which is a 64-bit processor. So just make sure that you've got the right devices. And again, you can build 32-bit for older devices, 64-bit for newer, and for the newer 64-bit devices and apps, you can build the universal binary. Okay, so these are the resource links that are on the blog post, which is the short URL is down there, embt.co/sprints-iOS-64. It's case sensitive. And I'll type that link over here as well. So I've got what's new in the X8 product, new compilers for iOS 64-bit for both Delphi, the DCC iOS ARM64, and the BCC iOS ARM64 compilers. Those are documented in the doc wiki. And these are there are several, but these are the two Apple announcements about on October 20th, they said 64-bit and iOS new apps will only be accepted in the App Store starting February 1st. You can still have the universal binary 64 and 32. And then in December 17th, they mentioned that starting June 1st of this year, if you want to update an existing app, then it must have 64-bit. In addition, it can have 32-bit as well. It can have a universal binary. So back in for February, they said if you've got 32-bit apps in the store, you can keep updating them as long as they were accepted in the store. But now they're saying that starting June 1st, you can update an existing app, but it has to be universal binary, or it has to be changed to 64-bit. Otherwise, they won't accept any more 32-bit only updates to existing App Store apps starting June 1st. All right. Next week's skill sprint is how to migrate your apps to the latest version of Red Studio, Delphi, and C++ Builder, X8. There's the whole schedule on the sprint landing page, which is over here. Here's the developer skill sprints. That's how you registered. So here's all the upcoming topics between now and the end of June. And the replays will show up over here in the right-hand column. And there's that blog post. Let me put that somewhere in the chat log. This is that video. This is that original October announcement that Apple did starting February 1st. New iOS apps uploaded. New iOS apps, the App Store, must include 64-bit support and built with iOS 8 SDK. And then in December, they said, okay, now app updates must include 64-bit support and be built with iOS 8 SDK. starting in June 1st, 2015. Okay. All right. We have current offers available for Rad Studio XE8. There's an introductory special, save 10% off the upgrade or list price for a new license. There's bonus packs, the premium styles, the Object Pascal handbook, and other things. Go to the Embarcadero.com Rad offer page. If you're on older versions, meaning XE2 and earlier, that aren't part of the normal upgrade offer cycle, if you choose to add update subscription to your order, then you can get the upgrade price, which will save you up to 45% off the upgrade price of XE8. So if you're on XE2 and earlier, you can still get the upgrade price if you add update subscription. You can download the trial, and the trial is the full architect version of Rad Studio, so you can test out the 64-bit iOS compilers for Delphi and C++ and build apps and test them. Just go to embt.co/trial downloads and choose Rad Studio XE8, and you can install it, download it, install it, and activate it, and use it for 30 days to do your testing if you don't have XE8 already. There's my email address. We'll switch over to Q&A. There's my Twitter handle @DavidI99, and again, there's the short URL for the blog. Let's go and look at the question area. How to import a project to XE8? Just open the project. And then he had a question. Let's see, Grigor. Project created XE5, XE7. Open the project to XE8. How to delete records from applicate? Deploy project. Which path to XE5, 6, 7? So I'd probably delete the application deploy proj, or go under project deployment, and you might be able to do something there. But I'll take a look at that one, Gregor. You can send me a reminder on email. Let's see, Alpha saying, to make clear, it is still allowed to publish 32-bit versions after February as long as the main product is 64-bit. So if you have an app, this is only for App Store apps, not if you deploy direct to the device. So if you want to put an app in the App Store, if you have a 32-bit accepted app in the App Store, you can still update that 32-bit app until June. 32-bit only. If you put any new apps in the App Store, if you submit any new apps to Apple, then those apps have to be either be 64-bit only or the combined 64 and 32-bit. Apple has gone on to say that starting in June, even if you update an app that was a 32-bit accepted app, you can't update a 32-bit only as of June 1st. You must, for that 32-bit app that's already in the App Store, you must include a 64-bit version as well. So you have to read Apple's statements clearly, and I have the links to both of those developer statements on the blog. Again, February 1st, apps that you submit can be a combined 32 and 64, but they cannot be 32-bit only unless they were already accepted as a 32-bit app. You have until June to update a 32-bit only app. Starting in June, whether it's a new app or an updated accepted app, it must have 32 and 64 or be 64-bit only. Let's see. Ray's asking, do you recommend developing on a Mac for simplicity of development? It's really your choice. I work on a Mac only because when I travel, it's easier to carry one machine around and use virtual machine for Windows and the Mac OS X all on one lightweight notebook. Here, some of the developers have a Mac Mini and then a Windows notebook that they work on, or a Windows desktop. So, if you want to carry around a Mac Mini that's got an Intel processor, that's nice too. You just have to make sure they're connected on a network. In the case of mine for travel, and that it's all on one machine, I don't have to network two different machines. Vishwa is asking, if I open a project in XE8, can I later open it in XE7? No, you can't. What you should do is save your XE7 project somewhere and copy and then open to XE8. There is a migration IDE utility to migrate your settings from XE7 to XE8, so you can check that out. There's a utility in the bin folder for reading the registry and moving over your color settings, your display settings, and other things. Let's see. So if I understood it correctly, you don't have to have an iPhone 5S6 to create a 64-bit to Apple Store. You don't have to have a 64-bit device to create a 64-bit app to put in the App Store, Antonio, but you'll want to test your code on a 64-bit device or on any device. You always want to test your code on device, even if simulators and other things. You'll want to test your apps. We've done a lot of the work. We did that actually years ago on the RTL and the compilers when we did Win64 support. We made a lot of the right decisions back then to have 32-bit and 64-bit apps on Windows work correctly with the right RTLs. We used all of that same capability for iOS 32 and iOS 64. We needed to also, though, test to make sure that FireMonkey works on 32 and 64-bit iOS. So that was a little bit extra work, as well as having the compilers for ARM64. That took a bunch of work. When Apple told us about it, this change, after we shipped XE7, and so we had to build new compilers for Delphi iOS 64-bit and C++ Builder 64-bit and compile the libraries, make sure FireMonkey do all the testing. All of that's available in XE8. So you don't have to have a device to put something in the store. You can hope that you did everything right and that it works and that Apple accepts it. But it's always better to test against the device along the way. Find someone who has one, plug it in, and test it. Thankfully, there weren't many changes between 8.2 and 8.3 simulator, but who knows what Apple will do next week. It's just we're committed to keeping up. We're testing all the betas of Yosemite and iOS. 8.4 is the next beta, I think. You look at the Apple developer news. So we're testing all of that to try to stay ahead of the curve, but depends on how many changes Apple makes and what we have to do on the tooling side. But the compilers are done. I guess again, it was a good thing that we went through the Win32, Win64 work, both for Delphi and C++ Builder before. A lot of the developers on the iOS side that are using Xcode and other tools have to go think about things like how long is an integer and how long are other things. Alexon's asking 64-bit iPod Touch old version. I don't believe any of the iPod Touches were 64-bit processor. Arnold's asking about iWatch. It's not shipping yet. We're looking at the frameworks and we're looking at the APIs, and we've ordered iWatches, and as soon as we can get our hands on it, we'll do some videos and show you what you can do. But yeah, iWatch, a bunch of us ordered them when the pre-order happened, and we'll see when we get them. George is asking, the current supported platforms are, so it's Windows 32 and 64-bit, Android 32-bit, OS 10, so Mac OS X or OS 10 32-bit, iOS 32-bit and 64-bit. And those are the same for Object Pascal or Delphi and C++ or C++ Builder. Are there any ways to reduce the size of universal bundles? Any suggestions? Nothing that I'm aware of. Again, we only duplicate the code portion of the application, not all the rest of the deploy files. So, icons, bitmaps, documents, databases, whatever. All the things that are in the data part of the bundle that's shared between the 32 and 64-bit app. So it only grows by the size of the app code itself. Can an iOS app develop with Delphi Access Store and share data with iOS HealthKit framework? So the answer is yes. We haven't done any wrappers for Delphi or C++ Builder for specific frameworks like HealthKit. We don't have any component wrappers, for example, drop down a T-Health component. We have a T-Beacon in XE8, so we wrap iBeacon technology in a component called T-Beacon, and we had T-Bluetooth LE that was there, but there's more to come. Somebody asked earlier today about what about iWatch, and none of us have any watches, although we've ordered them, so we're waiting like others for those to be shipped so that we can do some cool demos. If HealthKit framework isn't already added in the list, then you can just hit the add button in the frameworks for iOS 32 and 64 and give us the path to HealthKit, and then build an interface unit. But we're taking a look at what more to do with things like HomeKit, HealthKit, how to component wrap some of those things. But you can get at lower level frameworks directly. You can even include Objective-C code in your project if you use the command line compilers and linkers. You can do things like that. Let's see, Eric has said, is there a plan to have a version of Linux for DataSnap Web Broker? Is it always on work? It's on the roadmap, and we're committed to having Linux server side for DataSnap, EMS servers, SOAP servers, REST servers, and other types of server applications. So yes, Linux server is listed on the roadmap. We also are watching Windows 10 because Windows 10 is going to come out sometime this summer, and so we want to make sure that we have VCL and FireMonkey working very nicely for Windows 10 as well. Will there be an XE7 update to? We're on XE8 now, so I guess that's the way to answer that. Alan, the way to move forward is to upgrade to XE8. XE8 will get you all sorts of fixes and enhancements, mobile preview, all the things that are in what's new in XE8 and the 64-bit compilers for iOS. So XE8 is the release version. We did put out a hot fix for the security edition that Apple put into iOS in 8.1.3. So there's a hot fix that's out there for iOS 7 and for XE7, so that you can build apps that put your developer app ID as part of the deployment of your app. So, and Alan mentions there's this upgrade subscription model was going to include updates for 2 versions back where technically possible. And it says that very clearly if you read the update subscription. If we can bring something, for example, like the hotfix for XE7, even though XE8 was out now, for the updated security code signing that included the developer ID, we could do that for both XE7 and XE8, so that hotfix was released recently. Let's see. So David's asking, when you upgrade to XE8, do you have to uninstall XE7? No, you can leave XE7. I'm running them side by side on my computer, and I have another computer. My home computer has XE6, XE7, and XE8 all installed side by side. So it's not a problem. They get installed into a folder. Let's see, we're up to 16.0 for XE8, and so XE7 was 15.0, XE6 was 14.0, and so on. So there are some common files, but we try to make sure those are compatible across the versions if they get stuck in the common files area versus the bin folders of the different releases of Red Studio, Delphi, and C++ Builder. So they can live side by side. Okay, let's see. Patrick says, any new issues with writing wrapper to run unsupported frameworks? No, it's the same things. You can either use the bridge, or you can build your own Delphi or C++ wrappers around the frameworks. We do have an internal tool that we've built for converting Objective-C to Pascal. It's not ready for prime time use, but it lets you point at any Objective-C code and will create Pascal wrapper interfaces for you. We're using that internally right now to support additional frameworks that are popping up. Patrick says, I want it. Yeah, as soon as R&D releases it to me, we'll put a blog out and let developers do a beta with it, but it just wasn't ready for outside of the R&D team. But I've seen it, and I've seen it in action. It just needs more work. so that we can put it out there. Okay, everyone, that's the first skill sprint here for Q2, and it's great to have you all with us. Download the trial or upgrade to XZ8. There's all sorts of new stuff. You look at the product page, there's a whole bunch of new capabilities throughout the product, not just the iOS 64-bit compilers. Lots of new stuff, this beacon support for proximity beacons and push notifications from EMS server and a whole bunch of other things. So you'll see all of that throughout this quarter, as well as we'll have additional longer form RAD in Action webinars during the quarter. So take care, everyone. Great to have you with us, and we'll see you every Tuesday at this time.